In the name of the Holy One who guides us, makes us, and leads us. Amen. Well, good morning, Acolytes. I cannot wait to tell my boss, the presiding Bishop Michael Bruce Curry, that I have been a participant in a miracle today. Not only probably the longest liturgical procession in several years, but also I have seen over 500 young people that want to spend their Saturday at church. It is a gift. It is a miracle for all of us to be reminded of what the face of God looks like. And yes, I was informed that there might be one or two people here who were brought because their parents made them. But in this situation, in this miracle, there is room for you too. There is, in fact, room for all of us, every set of hands to carry something. Because acolytes make the difference. Be they high church or low church, Protestant or Catholic, whether they walk in a straight line or just sit in the pew and wait for the bell to ring, acolytes matter to how we understand God. And now more than ever, we need that understanding. We need that picture of what God looks like. I have a friend who says, God doesn't just look like one person's image, but it's all of us. It's all of us collectively making that march to the altar. We need that diversity, that boldness, that fierceness that is folks who would come and lead us in the way. Acolytes have been some truly impressive people, not just in the church, but in the world. One of my heroes, Archbishop Tutu, do you know he was a teenage acolyte? He had just started high school, and he came down sick in 1944 in South Africa, and an Anglican monk named Trevor showed up at his hospital room, brought him some books to read, and I think a rota for service. Archbishop Tutu credits that invitation to walk the way of church acolytes with shaping his spirituality, and not just as a person, but as a leader who eventually changed the world. He said in his own words, the extraordinary miracle that was South Africa after apartheid was due in a large part to people like Brother Trevor and church folks who just kept reminding us to walk in a way that shows that we all count, that you too matter in the sight of God, and that this acolyte training led him to remember to never be afraid. He's not alone. People have been doing this since the 4th century, I think. The very first religious procession with candles and torches and crosses. They've been doing it so long that for some it brings joy, for some it just reminds them they'd rather be watching the Macy's parade. But even if you're waiting for the Super Bowl and your favorite player to come through the tunnel, something about that memory of marching and waiting brings us, our hearts, a little closer to something that's a little holy. I think that acolytes preach the best sermons, but they don't do it with words. They do it just one step at a time. Because when you walk in the footsteps, in the paths of someone that came before you, that taught you, that loved you, that showed you the Jesus movement, you're proclaiming the gospel. And that's a gift. That's a gift we all need. Acolytes tend to grow up and do great things, but I have to say, I think the worst acolytes are seminarians. They tend to take it a little far sometimes. I do remember a story of one seminary where they felt the acolytes should raise it up a notch. The service should be fancier with more incense and bigger candles. And so someone stole a baby Jesus from the creche, and someone might have replaced a candle with a firecracker. And in that particular procession, it was an Ascension Day. There was an accident, but it really made the ascension of Jesus real to the eyes of those who watched. Not to be outdone, my own sort of snake belly low seminary in Virginia was known to espouse a different view of acolytes and liturgy, one where you take the back seat, where the word and the embodiment take place other ways. And so to deliver this message, the Blessed Virgin Mary did it. Well, a 2-foot tall stone statue of her that normally resides by the base of a tree. She went processing. Night after night, she'd show up with her candles lit and the accoutrement laid outside of the dorm room of other seminarians. We know that she went on these processions because she started a Facebook page, and like any good minister on Sunday afternoon, posted pictures of the end of her ministerial journeys. We all bring God out into the public in different ways, with candles and books, with incense, or with just the melodies in our hearts. But it's a mission. It's a mission that Jesus calls us to do. And Jesus in this gospel was proclaiming and preaching all the cities and villages and synagogues. He noted that there was a huge harvest, but we need more laborers. And who amongst you will be those laborers? Well, the hint is a little earlier in Matthew. It's the blessed. The blessed in the crowds, even if you're poor, or if you're mourning, or if you're meek, or if you've known hunger, even if you need to be filled with something of the joy of Jesus, you are the chosen laborer. You are the one that's the adequate ambassador. You are the one to show us that Christ can lead us into transformation. Now, you can't fault folks for saying no to this challenge. Even the prophets of old sometimes said no. Jeremiah was just a teenager when God called him and said, "Go out and preach this word." And he said, "No thanks." But God reminded him that I formed you before I knew you. And importantly, there's something in your heart, something that rings true, not just about the doom and sadness of the world, the stress and fragility, but the things that can make your heart feel dry and closed, like a shrub needing water in the desert, can be turned around. Can instead, with just saying, "I trust in God," be blessed. And when those things turn around, when hearts are open, well, you will be like a tree with roots that sink down into the water. And as the creation care director for the Episcopal Church, I can tell you there's worse things to want to be than a tree. Trees are great. Trees give us all the oxygen of the universe. Trees make it possible for all of life. But trees in our poetry and in our Bible, well, they hold up the sky. They remind us to touch heaven, like a tree planted by the water. As the old Negro spiritual said, "You will not be moved." Blessed are you if you can pay attention, if you can open your heart, if you can be not afraid and trust in the Lord. May you also be like a tree planted by the water. Perhaps this is one of the things that all acolytes come to know, that the best sermons are done with the feet, that paying attention to something precious shows you the divine, that wonder and awe are true gifts. And whether or not you process or ring the bells or preach the sermons, you are showing us a glimmer of God. And yes, many acolytes process around, many acolytes stay in the pew, but there are those special ones that lead us right out the door of the church. 60 years ago, a few months past, a group of teenagers in Alabama, in Birmingham in fact, heard the call of the adults in their lives, bemoaning, lamenting that the civil rights movement was in a down space. The leaders were feeling sad and like shrubs dried up in the desert. There was a lack of hope. People thought, well, nothing will ever change in America. It can't be done. And yet, it was these teenagers, the 16th Street Baptist Church Acolyte crew, in fact, who heard the call. And with prayer and preparation and leadership, and they asked their parents for permission, they started the next procession. And they started from the church, lining up in perfect order, 2 by 2. But then they walked clear out of that church. And they faced things that we all hope none of us ever have to face again. Police and dogs and fire hoses. But it was this reminder. The song they were singing, just like a tree that's planted by the water, we shall not be moved. And over 1,000 teenagers and young children marched for days in the most holy and scary of processions, right out from that altar. And I think the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King had that image in his mind when he wrote about all those who do their little part. He said, even if it falls to your lot to do something small, like a sweeper or an ironer, go out there and sweep like Michelangelo painted pictures. If you're ironing the altar cloths, iron them the way Handel and Beethoven played music. Whatever you're doing, do it like Shakespeare wrote poetry. And if you're gonna acolyte, he didn't say this, but I'm gonna add, if you're gonna acolyte, go and process so well. If you're gonna verge so well that heaven and earth will sing with joy and will note, here goes a beloved child of God, like a tree that's planted by the waters. Even little children can be catalysts for change, and so whatever you carried in here, be it your banner or your cross or just your hopes, be you straight or queer or trans, be you Puerto Rican or Bayesian, wherever you come from, a suburban parish, or if you did blessings of the animals with cows and horses. If you're from a church where they did Ash Wednesday at the subway steps, wherever you brought, wherever you walked, know that you matter. You acolytes, because you remind us that this world that might be held captive by all kinds of sadness and sin and fear and anxiety and injustice needs a little good news, and it will see it every time you lead us in procession. Blessed are you, and blessed is the God that leads us from the foot of the cross to the day of resurrection. And may all God's acolytes say, Amen.